mushrooms and the gourd and the toothed fungi and so on. And of course, there's many ways to classify. Traditionally, some people would classify nature by edible, non-edible, right? All people want to classify mushrooms by edible and poisonous, but some of the edibles are poisonous for some people. The other way around is much rarer. Like the bitter boletes can be eaten by people who don't taste bitterness. They enjoy them, no problem. Anybody who tastes bitterness throws up. So it's a genetics thing. Anyways, so these Amanitas, they're all associated with trees. The trees give sugar to the mushroom, and the mushroom gives nearly all the water and all the minerals to the tree. The tree roots often just end up being available to the mushroom that attaches, and it's ectomycorrhizal. The mycelium, the mushroom, goes into the root and transfers minerals and water in exchange for sugar. So 90% of our plants are associated with mushrooms that feed them, and vice versa. And even in an old-growth forest, you have mushrooms like Amanita or bolete or whatever. It's connected to different species. It might get sugars from a tall Douglas fir and might give it to a huckleberry. But it also feeds it from a big tree and keeps the little trees alive that can't survive without the mushrooms. People covered a little hemlock in old-growth forest for 3 months. No sunlight. Every tree would die, you do that to it, unless it has a mushroom that feeds it and keeps it through the dire times. Because the mushroom wants to make sure, these ectomycorrhizal mushrooms, want to make sure that when the big tree comes down, the little trees can take over. Now that kind of research was not very popular in the United States. In Eastern Europe, they did much more on that kind of research, because you don't want to have these facts in nature that the managers of the forest, take the sugars from the big guys and keep the little guys alive till they can take over, So anyways, by now there's no dispute about that. These mushrooms manage the energy flow in the forest, and not just in the forest, in many ecosystems, but in the forest it's the most evident. Now, these first 3 traces, Amanita, and Amanita is quite famous because it has the most famous mushroom, the fly agaric, in its group. It has the most deadly ones, death cap, destroying angel, and it also has some choice edibles, which you can say some of my pictures from Tibet. There's the Caesar, the Himalayan Caesar mushroom. In Italy, they're totally crazy about the Caesar. Also in the Himalayas, it's collected, and in California, there's also relatives of the Caesar mushroom, which is also an Amanita. Actually, the fly agaric was eaten in northern Germany. I'm from southern Germany originally. In northern Germany and in Holland, people would cook it up. They would neutralize the ibotenic acid, which really messes up your digestive system and gives you hallucinations. But if you slice it and cook it hard and parboil it, you can render it edible. But that was just some local knowledge, which you don't find mentioned in most books, but the knowledge is out again. So this one grows all over town and out in the forest. It's sometimes associated with birch, with conifers, with oaks, and many animals can even eat the deadly Amanitas without any problem. So you can't rely on saying, hey, the deer can eat these mushrooms, I can eat it. It doesn't work that way. The deer have selected evolutionary to eat these Amanita toxins without problems, and we haven't selected for it yet, and I don't think it will not happen anymore. The Amanitas, they all have and we are not supposed to touch the mushrooms, but I can. They have a very wide stem base. They have a ring, most of them. And here they have the speciality of having these spots on top. This is a remnant from the universal veil. And the universal veil, when the mushroom is young, is covered in one tissue. And when it grows, it breaks up and it spreads, and you have these dots left. And on the base of the stem, you have these rings here where the universal veil was attached. And that's a thing you only find in the Amanita group in this way. There's a couple other things that have also, on the base, it's called a vulva. These guys have a very big vulva, that cup, that sac. But it's mostly Amanita out here. So whenever you find a mushroom with this big white stem base, with a sac around it or tissue around it and a ring and white gills, you know, you better don't mess with them. You can put any mushroom in your mouth, taste it, spit it out, nothing will hurt you. So the point is, you don't want to have a branch fall on you while you just try, oh, how does the deadly taste? And then you get knocked out and this thing goes through your system. So, there's nothing like with plants. You have like dog bane stuff that gives you blisters and really attacks your skin or things. Mushrooms don't do that. I think there's one tropical mushroom that does that also. But out here, you can taste, and taste is an important ID for identification. Bitter, sour, sweet, acrid, many tastes. Smells too. Some smell like garlic, some like fruit, bleach, all these things. And now we have software where you just put in bleach and you get all the mushrooms popping up that smell of bleach. The old days you had to go through a book and look for each of them. Now software, matchmaker, free download. You put in bleach and you get 15 mushrooms that have an odor of bleach. And then you just look at 15 pictures and then it's easy, because they all look quite different. And to pick one out of 15 mushrooms by picture, it's not difficult. To pick one out of 1,500, it's a different issue. So the Amanitas, I don't know why we don't have our death cap here. We had one on Tuesday, probably liquefied by now, growing in the Arboretum, and that is probably half or 2/3 of all global mushroom death come from deadly Amanitas. Now, if you go early enough in an emergency room, the survival chances are by now 50-60% or so. Otherwise, your liver will be done. And the good news is you jumped the line, because it's pretty hard to live without a liver. But the Amanita toxins, they stop liver cell reproduction, and somehow the liver liquefies or so pretty nasty. So whitish mushrooms, the ones with the dots and red caps, they make you sick, but they don't kill you. Unless you get so high that you lay out in the snow and pass out, and yes, people froze to death that way. But it wasn't directly the mushroom, it was being stupid in several ways. So the deadly Amanitas, white cap that turns greenish, is greenish or brownish, smells quite awful, and but it looks pretty much like these guys without the dots and whitish or greenish, and they have been introduced from Europe and they spread like crazy, especially in California. All the oaks, they like take these oaks on and spread with them. And yes, on one side it's a curse and it's a pity that people die. On the other side, most people bother to start studying about mushroom because the gamble is a little higher than with other things. So there's a good side to the dangers of mushrooms too, and it leaves more edibles for the ones who make the effort. So they can come in a whitish version, that's a white variation. Then they come in yellowish, that's a different species, Chamata. Then we have a brown version, Pantherina, and they all look quite odd this year because of the drought. I mean, it's a miracle we have these mushrooms. It's like each year, usually in a good year, we only show about 10-15% of what's brought in. I mean, this year, basically all we got we're showing here, with a few exceptions, because 70 days of drought, mushrooms need moisture. No moisture, no mushrooms. So a few rainstorms in the mountains, somebody hit in the right spot where a good thunderstorm was, then the mushroom pop up. And of course in a week, 2 weeks, we will have mushrooms after these rains, but it won't be a great year. It's just too late. The frost will kick in. In the mountains for sure, down in the lowlands, maybe we're lucky and we have a season till Thanksgiving as in some years. These are quite different Amanitas, Amanita vaginata group, no ring. These lines, striation, hollow stems, and they're very big vulva, and in France they eat these things. They're known as the grisette, but out here most people don't. Not because it's poisonous, but because of the relatives, relatives, it's not too stupid to be careful. It's a good call. So that's a white version of it, and but the important thing to remember is this white stem base, the ring, and white gills, and all this should communicate to you, I'm poisonous, I stay away. And these guys here are pretty similar, but if you look closer, it's easy to tell apart. The shaggy the shaggy parasols, we have 3 species out here. Well, actually, I should first mention that guy. this Leucoagaricus naucinus looks very much, when it's in pristine